They say the hardest part of growing old is the pain in your joints. They are wrong. The hardest part is becoming invisible to the people you raised. My name is Arthur Pendleton. I am 74 years old. I spent 45 years building a lumber empire in the Pacific Northwest. I worked 60-hour weeks so my son, Richard, could go to Ivy League schools, and my daughter Claire could have the grandest wedding in Seattle. When my wife, Eleanor, passed away 2 years ago, the house became very quiet, and my children became very attentive. At first, I thought it was out of love. Richard started visiting every Sunday. Claire started asking about my health, my doctor's appointments, and my will. "We just want to make sure you're protected, Dad," they would say, with those warm, practiced smiles. They looked at my gray hair, my slight limp, and the cane I use on rainy days. And they saw weakness. They assumed my mind was fading, just because my body was slowing down. That was their first mistake. It happened last Thursday. Richard had insisted on installing a new smart home system in my study. "For your safety, Dad," he said, "in case you fall." He synced it to his own iPad. He thought I didn't understand modern technology. He thought I was just an old man who couldn't use a smartphone. He forgot that I am the man who taught him how to read. After he left, I noticed he had forgotten his iPad on the kitchen counter. The screen was still unlocked. I didn't mean to pry. I simply went to turn the screen off. But there was an email drafted on the screen, addressed to a high-profile estate lawyer in the city. The subject line read, "Medical Power of Attorney and Competency Hearing, Arthur Pendleton." I put my reading glasses on. I read the email. My heart didn't break. It just turned to ice. My children weren't visiting out of love. They were gathering evidence. They were plotting to have me declared mentally incompetent. Why? So they could bypass the trust, liquidate my company, sell the home I built with my late wife, and place me in a comfortable, assisted living facility. I set the iPad down exactly where I found it. I walked over to the large oak window, looking out at the pine trees I had planted 50 years ago. They think I am an old lion without teeth. They think it is time to put me out to pasture and divide the spoils. But an old lion is still a lion. And if they want to play a game of chess with the rest of my life, I am going to make sure they never forget who taught them how to play. They say blood is thicker than water, but I have learned that money dissolves both. After I read Richard's email, I didn't confront him. I didn't call Claire to ask why she was helping him plan my demise. If you warn a thief that you know they are stealing, they just learn to hide it better. Instead, the next morning, I put on my best wool suit. I took my cane, and I drove myself into the city. Not to see my children, but to see Thomas. Thomas Sterling has been my corporate attorney for 35 years. We built my lumber company together. He is 76. A bulldog of a man who survived 3 heart attacks and outsmarted every ruthless businessman in Seattle. He doesn't use iPads. He uses paper, ink, and absolute loyalty. I walked into his office and placed the printed screenshot of Richard's email on his mahogany desk. Thomas put on his reading glasses. He read it in silence. He didn't show pity. He just looked up at me, his eyes sharp. "They are moving for a competency hearing, Arthur," Thomas said, his voice gravelly. "They want to freeze your assets and declare you unfit. If a judge signs off, they take the house, the company, the trust, everything." I leaned on my cane, looking out at the gray Seattle skyline. "How long do we have, Thomas?" I asked quietly. 3 weeks, he replied. Maybe 4 before they file the petition. What do you want to do? We can fight them in court. Prove you are sane. I shook my head slowly. No, Thomas, I said. Fighting them proves that I consider them a threat. I don't want to fight them. I turned to face my oldest friend. I want to become a ghost. Thomas smiled faintly, a predatory smile. And so, the restructuring began. Over the next 14 days, while my children thought I was doing crossword puzzles and taking afternoon naps, Thomas and I dismantled a 45-year-old empire, legally, quietly, irrevocably. We transferred my 70% voting shares in the lumber company into a blind trust, registered in Delaware. The family estate, the $5 million home my children thought they were going to inherit, was quietly sold to a private holding company. A company that I control. I didn't leave them with nothing. I left them with an illusion. On paper, it looked like everything was exactly the same. But the reality was, they were inheriting empty boxes. Last night, Claire called me. Her voice was dripping with that fake, sugary concern. "Dad," she said brightly, "Richard and I are coming over for a special family dinner this Sunday. We need to have a serious talk about your future." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I replied, keeping my voice soft like a tired old man. "I look forward to it." I hung up the phone. The trap was set. They think Sunday is going to be my execution. They don't realize they are walking straight into their own funeral. Sunday evening arrived with a cold rain. My children sat across from me at the long mahogany dining table, the same table where I taught them how to hold a fork, where we celebrated their graduations. Richard poured me a glass of my own vintage Cabernet. Claire smiled, reaching across the table to pat my hand. It was a perfect portrait of a loving family, except for the thick manila folder resting next to Richard's plate. "Dad," Richard began, his tone slow and deliberate, like he was speaking to a child. "Claire and I have been talking. We are worried about you." Claire nodded, looking at me with practiced sympathy. "You've been forgetting things, Dad, and living in this massive house all alone. It isn't safe anymore. We found a beautiful facility in Bellevue. 5-star care." Richard slid the folder across the polished wood. "These are just some standard papers, Dad," he said smoothly. "Medical power of attorney and a transfer of the company's voting rights to me. It's just to protect the family legacy. While you rest." I looked at the folder. Then I looked at my children. They had the pens ready. They were holding their breath. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the wine in their faces. I simply reached into my breast pocket and pulled out my reading glasses. I opened the folder. I read the first page in absolute silence. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked. Finally, I closed the folder. I took off my glasses and sat up straight. I didn't lean on my cane. I didn't let my shoulders slump. "This is very thorough, Richard," I said, my voice dropping its frail, tired act. It was the same voice I used in the boardroom for 40 years. Richard blinked, slightly taken aback by the shift in my tone. "It's for the best, Dad." "Yes," I replied calmly. "I agree. You both clearly need control. But there is a slight problem. With these documents." Claire frowned. "What problem?" I folded my hands on the table. "You are asking for control of Arthur Pendleton's estate, but as of Friday morning, the estate no longer exists." The room went dead silent. Richard's fake smile completely vanished. "What are you talking about?" I transferred my 70% stake in the company to a blind trust in Delaware, I said evenly. Managed by an independent board. You, Richard, are explicitly barred from voting. And this house? I gestured to the grand dining room. I sold it to a private holding company. I am currently leasing it back for the remainder of my life. Claire stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. You sold the house? Our inheritance? Dad, you can't do that. You're not in your right mind. I looked up at her, my eyes cold. I have 3 signed affidavits from the top neurologists in the state, Claire, dated this week, certifying my absolute, undeniable mental competency. I slid their folder back across the table. You thought I was deaf, Richard. You thought I was blind, Claire. You forgot that I built this family, and I can dismantle it. Richard's face was red with fury. He opened his mouth to shout, but I raised a single finger, and he stopped. You don't get to fire me from my own life, I whispered. Now, get out of my landlord's house. Silence is a beautiful thing, especially when you are the one who created it. It has been 6 months since that Sunday dinner. The house is quiet again, but this time, it is a peaceful quiet. Richard tried to sue the blind trust. He spent $50,000 in legal fees, trying to prove I was manipulated. The judge threw the case out in 10 minutes. Without my voting shares to protect him, the independent board I appointed reviewed Richard's performance. They fired him from the very company he thought he already owned. He is currently looking for a mid-level management job at 50 years old. And Claire? Her husband suddenly realized that the massive Pendleton inheritance he was waiting for was a myth. Without my money to fund their lavish lifestyle, their picture-perfect marriage is slowly falling apart. I didn't ruin their lives. I just removed their entitlement. I forced them to finally live in the real world, a world I spent 40 years protecting them from. I sit on my porch now, watching the rain fall on the pine trees. Thomas comes over on Thursdays to play chess. We don't talk about my children. We talk about my future. Society tells us that as we get older, we should step aside. We are told to shrink, to make ourselves small, to hand over the keys and wait quietly for the end. But let me tell you a secret about growing old. Wisdom is not a liability. It is the sharpest weapon in the room. Do not let anyone, not your friends, not society, and certainly not your own blood, treat you like an expiring asset. Your legacy is yours to give, and yours to take away. If they respect the builder, they can share the house. But if they try to steal the keys, show them that you still know how to change the locks.